All right, we are looking back on the week in Maui and what's to come here for UConn as they get ready to play a really tough stretch here with Baylor, Texas, and Gonzaga coming up before Big East play. So joining me is Dave Borges. So Dave, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, no problem, Jared. No problem at all.
So let's start with this one. I mean, you've been around this team for a while, this staff. Heading into Maui, had you gotten any warning signs, whether it's just from having been around the team, what you'd seen in the games that had concerned you at all heading into that game, the first game in Maui against Memphis?
Yeah, I mean, certainly they didn't look great in their final, uh, bye game prior to leaving for Maui. Obviously, Dan Hurley was not happy about their performance in that game. I can't remember who they played. Who was that? Um, but yeah, you know, I think there were you could see that defense could be an issue for them guarding the three, guarding. I mean, it's tough to tell against some of these, low major teams,
Yeah.
but it's sort of they didn't look as connected, which is understandable. A lot of new guys, and uh, and Dan had admitted before he went out there and said that he was going to be searching, was going to be tinkering with lineups probably throughout Maui. It just seems like they hadn't really established the kind of rotations, even the starting lineup that might work best. So, and that still seems to be a bit of a work in progress. Um, I didn't anticipate losing all three games by any stretch, but you knew that they'd be in for a challenge because, and I think Memphis, I liked Memphis, and I
Yeah.
think, but they were even maybe a little better than I thought they were going to be.
Yeah, no, agreed. It definitely looks like a very solid team that Penny Hardaway has this year. As the week goes on, what's it like seeing this team, now having to play that second and third game in a row after losing that first one? That, what was a close one, lost to, had that nice comeback, but then lost in overtime. How tough was it to kind of see the team continue to build that rhythm and some momentum after losing that first one?
Yeah, well, again, you get the 3 games in 3 days. You don't really have a chance to kind of practice and shore up your mistakes. Obviously, you can watch game film and things like that, but now every team's in the same situation, so it's
Yeah.
not an excuse. But yeah, it's true that they weren't kind of able to kind of shore up some of their shortcomings, and got popped in the next 2 games. Obviously, Colorado was a close game. Memphis was, they lost the 2 games by a total of 3 points, and
Yeah.
I suppose you could argue that if a couple of over the back calls went different ways, they might have they might have won those games, but they didn't, and they were exposed for some of their shortcomings. And then it just all caught up with them at the end against Dayton, which to me also in person looks like a pretty good team, but not a team that should be beating UConn by
So,
14, 15 points.
yeah. As you're watching this team play in Maui, I mean, obviously the defense was a big issue there. What was the biggest takeaway coming out of the week that, hey, if this UConn team's going to get to a level that fans and people expected them to be at, here's the top thing they need to do to move forward to work on.
Well, I do think it's defense, but that's easy to say. And you don't have a 7'2" guy in the middle anymore. You don't have Stephon Castle, 6'6" long guard who can take away a team's best scorer on the perimeter. You just don't have that, so you can't replace that. How do you get better defensively? They seem to play hard. They just got to play smarter, I suppose. Obviously, cut down on the fouling. Both big men had some foul issues out there in Maui. Stay in front of your man. There's a lot of things, but um, you can't teach 7'2" and you can't teach 6'6" with long arms, and that Steph McCaskill brought. So, improving the defense is going to be tricky, but it's not impossible by any stretch. And then again, the rotations. I just think that it seemed kind of odd out. Jalen Stewart scores 16 points and a half, and then barely plays in the second half. Didn't play much in the third game either. Jaden Ross doesn't. They don't seem to have found a particular role for him yet. And Dan was really just talking him up big time prior to the season. So obviously, point guard is an issue. Hassan Diarra starting, which he probably should at this point. Center, just Harris Reed start over Sampson. There's a lot of issues there.
Yeah.
So I think those two things, the defense and the kind of figuring out the rotations, were the biggest takeaways.
I'm curious because I think when I watch this team and look at those rotations and think of areas of where this team could improve, what concerns you more? What you've seen out of the center position or at that point guard position early on here?
Well, probably point guard. I do think that Hassan Diarra is a capable point guard. There are times when he's out there, deflecting passes, setting up guys for alley oops. He does that better than anyone on the team right now. Playing tough in your jock defense, hitting the occasional 3-pointer, driving to the hole pretty well. Now he has his shortcomings too. He turns the ball over a bit too much. You know, he's not perfect. He's kind of perfectly suited as sort of like the sixth man that he was last year. But I think point guard might be the biggest. Although I do think Ahmad Noel, the freshman, at some point with a little more playing time, a little more experience, could possibly. He's probably the most classic type point guard on the roster, but he is a freshman, so that's going to take time. I guess I would say that, as far as the center position, obviously Sampson with the fouls, and Terrace Reed had that trouble too, but I think Terrace Reed has proven to be a pretty good player. I'm not worried too much about him as far as an offensive player. Good moves down low, and to me, I just think Sampson is better in that role as the infusion off the bench, especially with his foul issues.
How important do you think it is for this team to get to where it wants to be, to have Aiden Mahaney be able to contribute a little bit more? I know that, obviously a tough adjustment coming over from St. Mary's, having to learn a new system. And it seemed like they were trying to make him more of a point guard where he had been a shooting guard. So what do you think his role looks like as this team moves forward?
Yeah, I have to believe it is more of a two guard. I think Dan even alluded to that after the final game they played out there. Uh, you know, this is a guy who he averaged 13.9 points per game as a freshman and sophomore, the exact same average at St. Mary's, which is the West Coast Conference isn't the Big East, but it's obviously has Gonzaga, it has other good teams out there. You know, he's a good player. He's a good shooter. He took a little dip last year as a sophomore, but I think the idea of him in sort of that Joey Calcaterra role seems logical. Kind of the guy off the bench who can come in, hit some threes, make things happen. That might be more his role for this team moving forward, I believe.
I think there are a couple other big storylines coming out of Maui, especially as it relates to Dan Hurley there. I mean, you've been on this beat for so long. Anything stick out to you about him and the refs versus what you've seen in the past? Because to me, as someone who's seen it from afar, it seems like it's kind of just been what we're used to seeing. Maybe he toned it a little bit down the past couple of years, but didn't seem like anything completely out of the blue for me from what you've seen from him in the past.
Yeah, a lot of even some of the stuff he's saying post game, he's said these type of things a lot over the past couple of years, and it just doesn't get the national attention because it's not on national TV or it's not in a big tournament. And yeah, I think I think every coach, of course, every coach yells at refs and gets out of control at times and are a little bit can get a little insane on the sidelines. Very few coaches don't. I do think Dan takes it a little too far at times. Not so much the stuff that gets in the technicals, but just the constant badgering and some of the stuff he says to the refs, even just lip reading. You can see some of the things he says. It's pretty rough. I mean, he was bad, and he admits it. At Wagner, at URI, he got better at URI when the team got better. He was bad early at UConn with the refs. He got better as a team got better. He feels like he needs to be that guy on the sideline when his team isn't as talented as they were the last couple of years. And he said as much that he feels like he has to be that guy this year a little bit because it's a new team, not quite as talented as last year, a lot of new guys. So I get it. The reaction is weird because, like you said, I have seen this from him a lot, but I think to people who maybe don't see it all every night, and he's not every night, but I mean, the stuff he did in Memphis and the way he acted against Memphis, it's a little over the top at times. I don't think only the most diehard UConn fan would probably say otherwise. I would think.
Looking to add some local flavor to your lineup, Martin Rosel's is the MVP of your game day spread and a slam dunk for any occasion. Proudly made in hard-hitting New Britain, their famous kielbasa and hot dogs have been a fan favorite for over 96 years. You can find their products in grocery stores across the state or have them delivered directly to your home court, coast to coast, via martinrosel.com. Take your taste buds to the championship and go support a UConn fan-owned business. The other kind of storyline, and it was one that broke out after the Maryland Eastern Shore game was, and it didn't really break after that game. You all at CT Insider had talked about this probably being UConn's last Maui trip and kind of this MTE style. But when he reiterated that in the press conference Saturday night, it seemed like that kind of started to make some more news. For those listening who may not have read the piece, can you talk a little bit about this shift away from these MTEs in Maui? Because that was reported on before this had started.
Yeah, I wrote about that about a week before Maui, talking to Dan and David Benedict. Just the idea that, and this is something Dan had said prior to me, kind of off the record, but it's the reason I wanted to pursue the story is because these things they're expensive for one.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. Traveling 5,000 miles out to Hawaii, bringing the team and staff out there, and not really getting a whole lot in return financially. And look, finances are important these days with revenue sharing coming up, and obviously with NIL and things like that. It's a different world, so it's pretty expensive to go out there. And as Dave Benedict said, these promoters of the event or the people who run these events are kind of making money off the backs of these teams and these kids. So I think, the idea of just simply playing home and homes against top-notch kind of Power Six type or Power Five type programs is a lot more attractive to UConn. Certainly, it still gets you good non-conference games every year, and it's a lot less expensive. They're certainly going to continue to play games at Madison Square Garden or Barclays in New York City in 1 or 2 day events. And he didn't Dave Bennett didn't completely rule out playing in the battle for Atlantis or even Maui, but things have to change for that to happen.
Yeah.
The programs have to benefit more for that to happen again. And whether it's NIL type opportunities like they have out in Vegas now, which is a tournament I bet UConn would probably be interested in, things like that. It just all comes down to finances and what makes most fiscal sense in terms of the program.
Yeah. No, I know it was portrayed in some senses a little bit of sour grapes coming off an 0-3 trip, but I know you had that first well before that news broke there. I'm curious from your thoughts. They had one last tune-up game Saturday night against Maryland Eastern Shore before things really do kind of hit the battles for the Big East, Big 12. They've got Gonzaga, Texas, and then Big East play. Was there anything you were able to take away from that Maryland Eastern Shore game coming off the Maui trip, and whether you were able to kind of see any improvements that you were looking for from this team, or just you got to wait until they're playing some of this higher level competition to really pick up on anything?
Well, my biggest takeaway was that I need to buy Peacock because I did not attend the game. I was still catching up on my time zone change from Hawaii, and it's one of the few games of us since I've been on the beat that I did not cover. We had Mike Anthony there instead, and I don't have Peacock. I probably should, but I didn't. So I didn't actually see the game, which is. But I from all accounts, obviously they look better. They played better. It's hard to tell against Maryland Eastern Shore, but I think it was good for them to go out and feel good about themselves and see some balls go in the basket. And I know Jalen Stewart started in place of Alex Caravan, played well. I think he's a guy that probably needs to play a little more. They have a lot of good wings, man. It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough playing time for everybody. I think that's been he's battling with that. That in itself, it's kind of a good problem to have when you have a lot of talented wing players. But I just think again, good for them to go out and play pretty well and feel better about themselves after a tough week in Maui.
I know we've talked about I feel like we've talked about almost everyone on the roster, with the exception of Liam McNeely, a talented freshman that they were relying on this year. What have been your initial thoughts on what you've seen from him early on here?
Very impressive. Obviously, he had the 0 for 9 game against Dayton. But he was still distributing the ball well. He did not play like a freshman. Um, he's a good shooter, obviously, for the most part. And when he's not shooting, he can do a lot of other things. He can rebound. I think he's the second leading rebounder right now. Again, he's a good passer. He's a smart player. He knows where to be on the floor. A lot of good things about Liam McNeely, despite the bad game against Dayton. I like him a lot. They've talked about him as a potential one and done lottery pick. We'll see. I mean, it's a long season. We'll see how he does against these better teams. But he's not the problem right now.
So Wednesday night, UConn gets its first test again, real test after Maui here in Baylor at home. What are kind of a couple keys you're looking for out of this game if UConn's going to win it?
Well, again, defense. I mean, Baylor is a high octane team. Now they've had their own issues.
Yeah.
They had a great win over St. John's, where in an overtime game. I think it was overtime.
Yep.
Yeah, was it double overtime maybe?
It might
Anyways,
have
a
been. Yeah.
crazy game against St. John's where they looked like they were going to lose, and they ended up winning that game. But then they've been blown out in a couple of games. So it's hard to tell. I was really high on Baylor coming to the season. I think I had them ranked number 3 in my original AP poll. They've certainly dropped, but I just think they're too dangerous they're a very dangerous team offensively. Now, I think defense has been their issue. I think Wednesday night could be a high scoring game. I think it could be a fun game to watch if you like high scoring. And it's a game where I think that UConn, to me, I think UConn's maybe the biggest ally on Wednesday night will be the home crowd.
Yeah.
You get in Gampel, you get a team in Baylor who maybe's not playing as well as they thought they might. You get that amped up home crowd as the sixth man, and that could be a big advantage for UConn to carry them through a game that they really need to win.
If you had to take a guess of this final 3-game stretch of the non-conference with Baylor at Texas, Gonzaga at MSG, what would your guess be on those 3 games here?
Let's see how they come out of those 3 games.
Yeah.
The record. I'm going to be optimistic for them. I'm going to say 2-1. Don't ask me which ones they'll win and lose. I do think they could get a boost with a home game on Wednesday night. I don't think Texas is great, but it is a road game. You're still talking about a youngish team without a lot of experience going on the road, hostile environment, playing a good team. And then Gonzaga at the Garden. Again, the Garden. It's UConn's second home. Some would say their first home. Store South. Zaga, they lost to West Virginia, who's not a great team. I do think Gonzaga is very good, though. So, I think if they go 2-1, they'd be ecstatic.
Yeah.
So I'll say 2-1.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I mean, if I had to guess, probably leaning Gonzaga and Baylor as the 2 wins there with the Texas game being on the road. But you never know what can happen here. So we'll see what comes out of those 3 games there, and look from there. If they do go 2-1, does that get them back in your top 25?
2-1?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. If they beat Baylor, lose Texas, and then of course it depends on what other teams do too around them. It's hard to predict, but I would think if they beat Baylor and Gonzaga around a loss at Texas, they're certainly right back in the conversation as top 25 team, no question.
Yeah. Well, Dave, we'll see what happens over the next couple weeks here before we get ready to kick off Big East play and see what that holds. Certainly have some challenges of its own. I know the league struggled early on here out of the gate. What's your thoughts been on the Big East early on here?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like these 3 non-conference games could be huge in that sense because how many great opportunities will you have in the Big East? It seems like there may not be as many as in the past. Marquette has obviously kind of stood head and shoulders above the rest early on this year, which surprised me. I thought they'd be good, but losing Tyler Kolek and Oso Ighodaro, I thought that was those 2 guys are very, very special type players, unique players. Not just good, but unique. And I thought that was going to – but Cam Jones is clearly playing like the best player in the Big East right now. After that, I think St. John's will be good. I think UConn will be good. And I think Xavier will be good. And Creighton's weird, but with Kalkbrenner and Ashworth,
Yeah.
I know Kalkbrenner missed the last game injured. Um, you know, and some of the teams will rise. Hey, maybe DePaul will be that team. Who knows?
Yeah.
7-0 DePaul.
You never know. Well, Dave, appreciate you coming on. Hope you're getting back to being adjusted here on the mainland. And despite going 0-3, I hope you're able to enjoy Maui a little bit. You have some good food at least out there.
Yeah, yeah. Had some good food and got a little bit of a tan. Although I think I've lost most of it already. So, but it was nice.
There you go. Well, Dave, thanks so much for coming on, and I'm sure we'll talk soon. Thanks again.
All right, man. Take care.